We have to end the nuclear hostage situation right now. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. And on the line with us is David Kraft. David is the founder and director of the Nuclear Energy Information Service, NEIS. NEIS.org is their website, and NEI is their Twitter handle. And David, welcome to the program. You've got this new report out, and I see the Chicago Tribune picked it up, about the intersection of climate change and financial challenges and nuclear power and all of these things coming together. You're talking about basically this one company in particular, ripping us off like crazy. Tell us the story.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be on the show and to tell the story in the first place. Our organization is 39 years old, and during that whole time here in Chicago, Illinois, we've been monitoring and watchdogging what was at first Commonwealth Edison, and then that grew into Exelon Corporation. And Exelon now is a multi-state entity. It's the largest utility and the largest nuclear electric utility in the nation. And as you pointed out, Tom, they have their tentacles in states like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, and, of course, Illinois, which is where we have the most reactors in the country. Total, we had 14 at one point, and a few have been closed down. So we're down to 11, but we still have more than anybody else. So to get to your point exactly, two things have come together to help us write that editorial in the Tribune, which appeared on the 28th and 31st of August. The first is a multi-year campaign by Exelon to secure nuclear bailouts for what they claim are money-losing reactors. And we have pegged this as the new energy pandemic. It's bad enough we have to deal with COVID. Now we have to deal with all these nuclear operators in Illinois, in South Carolina, in Georgia, elsewhere, who have their hands out to bilk ratepayers billions of dollars for their money-losing nuclear reactors. And the way we have portrayed this, and over the last 6 years that we have fought it, is it really comes down to a nuclear hostage crisis. And I'll run the template real quickly so we can dovetail into the climate part. It goes like this. A company like Exelon comes to the legislature and says, we have these reactors, they're losing money, and unless somebody comes up with a new scheme to give us more money, we're going to have to close the reactors down. Now, what that triggers is a real local crisis for those communities, because Exelon is usually the biggest game in town. So you have a company-town situation. And, of course, there's a threat of enormous job loss, a reduced tax base, which, of course, affects public services and schools. So that's the first round of the template. Create a crisis, talk about all of the horrible things. The second part, though, is that they then tout themselves as a carbon-free green energy resource. And so that raises the environmental issue of how they can supposedly help out with the climate crisis. They claim to be emissions-free, they're clean power. So what they're doing there with this template is, in the first place, panic peddling the local communities to put pressure on legislatures to enact bailouts. And then secondly, try to cloak themselves in the mantle of environmentalism by saying they're clean, green, and emissions-free, none of which is true. So that's been the situation here, and we found that the message gets certainly a lot of local attention with local politicians like mayors, legislators in the districts, editorial boards from the papers, and more importantly, the unions, especially the IBEW and unions like pipe fitters and steam boiler unions, whose jobs are at stake if the reactors close. Now, in 2016, they finally got their first bailout here of $2.3 billion over a 10-year period to bail out 3 money-losing reactors in Illinois. They are now back in Illinois asking for a different method of getting compensation for 4 more reactors that they're threatening to close. So we're calling their bluff. This is a hostage crisis, and you don't deal with hostage takers. Our point all along is, if anybody needs bailing out, it's the communities that would be affected by Exelon's closure. And so we've been arguing for what's called just transitions for these communities, where you plan ahead for a reactor or even a coal plant that's going to close down. So you have money in the bank to protect your tax base, money in the bank to protect your local services. Now, how does this tie into the climate crisis? Recently, about 2 weeks ago, Moody's investors came out with a report which indicated that in this climate-disrupted world that we're observing now, where a third of the country is on fire and the other portion in the south is going to be underwater if all these hurricanes keep hitting, they mentioned that as the climate crisis worsens, the operating costs of nuclear reactors is expected to increase because they're going to have to beef up their safety systems to protect the environment and the communities, of course, from any kind of a catastrophic failure due to the climate changes.
Right.
So Moody's came out with this, and then just the other day, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists on the 14th had an article which also went into more detail about this, specifically in Florida at the Turkey Point reactor, saying, look, in a climate-disrupted world, nuclear power, at the very least, is going to cost much, much more than any other energy resource. But the other issue that gets overlooked is water. In a climate-disrupted world, I mean, it's already in our world, water is the most important resource, but in a climate-disrupted world, it's going to be much more unpredictable, much less available in certain parts of the country. And we have already found in Illinois over the last 30 years that there have been times when reactors had to close down when they were needed the most because there wasn't enough water to both produce the steam and to cool the reactors and keep them safe. So moving forward, anyone who hitches their wagons to the nuclear power industry generally, and any steam cycle resource like coal or fossil fuels, is looking for trouble.
Yeah, I get it. We're talking about David Kraft. He's the founder and director of the Nuclear Energy Information Service. And David, just very briefly, can number one, why not simply say to these power companies, okay, you need $4 billion, raise the price to your ratepayers and raise your own damn money, and then the ratepayers will be able to say, hey, wait a minute, my electric bill just went up $50 this month. I think I'm going to get some solar panels for my roof.
Yes, because no governor or state legislator in their right mind up for election wants to go in and say, I'm going to raise your electric rates. So that's the first part of your answer there.
But you're not. You're subsidizing the company.
Yeah. And our point all along is like, look, these are your reactors. Those are your assets. That's why you, Exelon, have a board of directors. You are a profitable corporation. If you think these assets are worth keeping and protecting, take the money from one of your other money-making enterprises and spread it around your corporation. That's your job. Right. The job of the Illinois legislature is to protect the public health and the environment. So they don't work for you.
Let's also rebut this argument that is made by the nuclear industry, and they're continuing to make it, and they make it loudly, that, we're not burning any, we got no stinking fossil fuels here. Your rebuttal, sir.
Well, again, that's wrapping the nuclear pig in a blanket of silk, saying that we're environmental and clean and green and we don't produce carbon dioxide. Yeah, it's true, there are no global warming gases when you produce the nuclear power on site, but nuclear power does have a large carbon footprint, much bigger than wind or solar, for example. And that was a point we made, is if you're going to reward this particular industry for its alleged environmental benefits of not producing greenhouse gases, then you should doubly compensate renewables because they don't produce.
Right. With this, I mean, it takes fossil fuels to run the giant equipment that they use for mining uranium out of the ground. It takes fossil fuels to power to transport that uranium ore. It takes fossil fuels in most cases to refine that iron ore. It takes fossil fuels to build the concrete containment shells and the steel. I mean, there's a mind-boggling amount of fossil fuel that goes into a nuclear power plant. We had an expert on this subject a while ago saying, it takes 15 years before a nuclear power plant produces its first watt of carbon-free electricity. Would you agree with that?
That's right. And then at the end of the day, you still have radioactive waste that you have to manage for tens or hundreds of thousands of years, and there's going to be a carbon footprint to that. You don't have that with renewables of any kind. So that's the message we send back to the legislature of, look, if you're going to reward people for environmental benefits, you got to give a double dip to renewables.
Yeah, there you go. David Kraft, the founder and director of the Nuclear Energy Information Service, NEIS.org is the website. Check it out. David, thanks a lot for dropping by today. Good talking with you.
Thanks for having us.